Have you been following coronavirus news every day with emailed or texted daily updates on new cases and death counts like I have? Well, even if you haven't been following it as closely as I have, you still may have realized that there's an abundance of coverage and data pertaining to the virus. Understanding and tracking this data is further complicated by different nations' responses and circumstances, with some countries beginning to reopen businesses or schools, while in others the death toll continues to rise and jobless claims increase. Articles covering these contrasting news and developments must express different sentiments towards the respective countries. With that in mind, we set out to visualize these differences in our project. We sought to analyze the sentiment towards different countries over time in relationship to COVID-19. In order to do so and produce an accurate picture, we needed to obtain hundreds of relevant articles from various news sources. Luckily, NewsAPI provided a source for these articles and a function to specify our queries and time range. Our initial hope was to retrieve articles from the past 5 months to follow the trends of sentiment as the outbreak and pandemic began and developed. But NewsAPI has a couple limitations on the developer key. Therefore, with the limitation of retrieving 100 articles per query, 260 characters per article, and only the past month's articles, we were going to have to work around and develop a proof of concept to avoid the monthly $450 for a business API key. However, we wrote our code with modularity in mind to allow someone with the business or enterprise API key to produce a more thorough representation of the data than we could. With that out of the way, let's discuss our work and findings. Before writing any of our code, we reflected on the latest news we had read and hypothesized the sentiments we expected news media to express on a handful of countries of interest. Due to the increasing deaths, jobless claims, and protests, we expected the US to have an overall negative sentiment, or at the least, a more negative sentiment than other countries. Countries in the process of recovery and reopening, such as Denmark, we expected to have an overall positive sentiment, especially in US and UK-based news media sources, as they presented a model of quick recovery and had maintained employment during the weeks of lockdown. We expected to find a similar positive sentiment for China, as they had reported a quicker recovery, they had built a hospital in a matter of days, and started to provide mask and ventilator manufacturing for other countries. But as conspiracies arose of the origin of the virus, the overall sentiment may be more ambiguous. When we hypothesized an increasingly positive trend for China, the conspiracies and investigations weren't fully developed or underway. We further wanted to look at India, the UK, Italy, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, as they might have presented interesting results. Our program allows for easy one-country searches or list of countries of interest, and this was our sample list.
First, we had to retrieve articles using NewsAPI. The NewsAPI module includes a function for searching for queries with multiple parameters in order to receive a JSON. We set up the parameters and allowed the variable input of country to append to the query on COVID-19. We then had to parse through the JSON to receive features of interest for each articles that we acquired. This includes source name, article title, the article itself, and the data publishing. With the collected data, we then had to clean up the text before scoring the articles. Due to our developer key, articles longer than 260 characters included ellipses and a bracketed number of remaining characters in the articles. Therefore, we removed the ellipses and the extra characters from the article content. But if we were to use a business key, the extracted data would not be affected by our manipulation. Furthermore, we wanted to analyze the sentiment expressed in the article title along with the article content, in part to increase the amount of text being analyzed, but also because article titles are the first thing people see. They immediately evoke a sentiment and leave a memorable impact on the reader. Therefore, more emotionally charged languages may be found in the article titles. With the With the article content, we then were able to analyze sentiment using VADER sentiment analysis polarity scores to produce a positive, negative, neutral, and a compound score. We played around with scoring individual sentences written by the same news source and scoring the whole article. We left in the code for both, but for results, we will talk about the full article scoring. After seeing the way VADER handles multiple sentences and how it takes into account capitalization and punctuation, we preferred this method. We're able to produce the sentiments expressed by different news sites over various published articles.
Moving on, we wanted to produce a visualization of the trend of sentiment over the past month, which again people with business keys for the News API could extend to track for the duration of the pandemic. Instead of classifying article scores under sources, we decided to classify them under the date they were published. By separating the scores into their respective dates, we were able to average the scores per day of individual countries and plot them. Now, initially, we plotted the average compound polarity scores per day for a country to visualize the overall trend. But to produce a more detailed image, we further created a function to show the positive and negative polarity scores and the averages per day. Then we added a linear regression to these plots. But due to our limited data, a linear regression tended to not be statistically significant, and it would be of great interest to us to see and plot with more than 100 articles of data and follow these changes over the past 4 months. One plot that did show statistical significance was the positive polarity scores for Japan. Japan showed an increase in positive sentiment over the past month. In addition to the sentiment scores, we wanted to visualize the words that were leading to these scores. To do so, we plotted word clouds from all the articles on certain countries, which you can see on the next slide. To get a deeper insight into the content of the articles, we thought a word cloud would be beneficial. Using the word cloud library, we were able to visually get a sense of the kind of words that were used and hence understand the sentiment. The bigger a word appears, the more weight it holds in influencing the sentiment. We were quite fascinated by the words that popped up, some more expected than others. The addition of the words such as racist, underreporting for Taiwan, fight for India, and death for the United States were interesting and were adding to the negative sentiment over the past month. Positive sentiments, for example with Denmark, can be attributed to words like easing. The word cloud really gave us a good picture of the measures taken by countries and in general was very informative.
Thank you for watching our video. If you'd like to learn more about our project or have a go of our code to learn about countries not mentioned, or change the topic of interest from COVID to your heart's content, make sure to check out the links down below.